There's something deeply strange happening right now as you read these words. You believe you're sitting somewhere, holding a device, processing information as a person separate from the rest of the universe. But what if I told you that this sensation of being you, here, now, separated from everything else, is the most convincing illusion ever created? I'm not talking about conspiracy theory or a digital matrix. I'm talking about something much more radical and liberating. The possibility that the entire world, including you as its protagonist, is a masterful game that existence itself is playing with itself. And what's most interesting is that your awakening from this illusion has already begun right now, in this exact instant when something inside you recognizes the truth in these words. We spend our entire lives taking everything way too seriously. Our problems, our achievements, our personal stories. We build a solid identity, defend our opinions, protect our emotional territory. But there's a cosmic laughter echoing behind all this seriousness. It's the laughter of someone who realizes they were playing a game and forgot it was just a game. Alan Watts used to say that the universe is God playing hide and seek with itself. And the whole joke is in getting so completely lost in the disguise that you really believe you're just a fragment, just a person, just a temporary body fighting for survival. Think about this for a moment. If you're a wave in the ocean, does it make sense for the wave to be afraid of returning to the ocean? Of course not, because the wave never stopped being ocean. It just took on a temporary form, danced a little on the surface, and came back home. We're exactly like that. We believe we're the wave and forget that we're the entire ocean. And all the suffering, all the anguish, all the sense of incompleteness comes from this fundamental forgetting. The ancient Hindus had a name for this masterful illusion: Maya. It's not that the world is false like some random lie. It's that it's false in the sense of not being what it appears to be. Maya is the perfect magic trick, the supreme illusion. It takes what is infinite, eternal, and indivisible, and makes it appear finite, temporary, and fragmented. It's like a dream so vivid that you completely forget you're dreaming. You feel pain in the dream, have fear in the dream, seek pleasure in the dream. And all of this is real within the logic of the dream. The problem isn't that the dream exists, but that you forgot you're the dreamer. Imagine watching a movie and getting so involved that you start shouting at the characters, crying over the tragedies, desperately rooting for the heroes. You know it's just a movie, but you still allow yourself to be swept away by the story. Now imagine you completely forgot you're watching a movie. You think that's the only possible reality. All the drama, all the suspense, all the suffering of the characters becomes absolutely real to you. That's Maya. It doesn't force you to believe. It simply invites you to a game so engaging that you voluntarily forget your true nature. And what sustains this illusion so perfectly? The ego. This character you've built over the years and defend tooth and nail. You believe you're a separate entity inside an envelope of skin, isolated from the rest of the universe, competing for limited resources in a potentially hostile world. But look closely. Where is this self? Can you find it? If you remove your thoughts, your memories, your bodily sensations, your emotions, what's left? Who's observing all of this happening? The great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi summed up the entire spiritual search in a single powerful question. Who am I? Ask this sincerely and watch how the ego, which seems so solid, begins to crumble when truly searched for. The ego is like a video game character that gained consciousness and forgot there's a player controlling everything. It thinks it's autonomous, that it makes independent decisions, that it's the author of its own story. But actually it's just a pattern of repetitive thoughts, a collection of stories about who you think you are. And the most interesting thing is that this pattern has no real substance. It's like trying to grab a shadow. The more you try to grasp the self, the more it escapes. Because it was never really there. It was just an idea, a concept, a linguistic trick that turned a verb into a noun. We say, I think, as if there's a separate I that makes thinking happen. But it would be more accurate to simply say, thinking is happening. Just like we say, it's raining. There's no separate rainer making the rain happen. The rain is just happening. Likewise, thoughts are just happening. Sensations are just happening. Experiences are just happening. And you're not the one making all this happen. You're the conscious space where all of this occurs. You're the screen where the movie is projected, not the character in the movie. But here's the cruelest trick of the illusion. We build our own prison. Nobody locked us in here. There's no cosmic jailer keeping us captive. We believe the stories of lack, the narratives of fear, the ideas of separation, and these beliefs become the invisible bars of our cell. It's like those circus elephants that stay tied up by a thin rope attached to a fragile stake. When they were babies, they tried to break free and couldn't. Now, even though they're strong enough to easily pull the stake out of the ground, they don't even try. They believe they're trapped. I know this is hard to hear, but the door to your prison was never locked. It's wide open right now. The problem is you're sitting in there waiting to find the perfect key, the right technique, the ideal moment to finally be free. You think you need to meditate for 10,000 hours, read 100 more spiritual books, find the enlightened guru who's going to give you the secret answer. But the truth that's both liberating and frustrating is that there's nothing to do. You're already free. You've always been free. The search for freedom is exactly what keeps you trapped. Look at the world around you. Everything you see out there is a perfect mirror of what you believe in here. That unbearable boss? It's the projection of the internal authority you reject. That person who deeply irritates you? It's the reflection of something in you that you don't accept. The problems that seem external, solid, real, are actually mental creations that keep the illusion of duality alive. When you stop resisting, when you completely accept what is, something extraordinary happens. The problem simply dissolves. Not because you solved it, but because you saw through the illusion that created it. It's like those optical illusions where you see two faces or a vase, depending on where you place your focus. Once you see the vase, you can't unsee it. Likewise, once you recognize that the external world is a projection of the mind, the very solidity of reality begins to waver. The walls that seem so concrete reveal their transparent nature. The enemies that seem so real show themselves to be unintegrated aspects of yourself. And you realize, with a mixture of relief and amazement, that you were fighting shadows all along. The mind doesn't like this. It prefers having real problems to solve, concrete enemies to fight, solid goals to pursue. Because that keeps the game interesting. That keeps you busy. And while you're busy trying to fix the world out there, you don't notice that the seeker itself is the problem. I'm not saying this to make you anxious, but to wake you up. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to see through the illusion that makes everything seem broken. And speaking of keeping the game interesting, let's talk about one of the biggest prisons we build: the need to be someone. From early on, we're trained to develop a strong identity, a defined personality, a coherent personal story. Who are you? What do you do? What are your goals? Your life story? Your achievements? And we become completely addicted to this narrative. We spend hours feeding the character on social media, polishing the image we want to project, defending our opinions as if they were extensions of our being. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You're not someone. You never were. Someone is just a role you're temporarily playing. And the more you cling to this role, the more you suffer. Because roles are limited by definition. If you believe you're the successful doctor, what happens when you retire? If you believe you're the attractive young person, what happens when you age? If you believe you're the witty, intelligent one, what happens when you don't have the answer? Identity is a mobile prison you carry wherever you go. Imagine the freedom of not needing to be anyone in particular, of being able to dance with different roles without identifying with any of them, of responding to the world spontaneously, without filtering everything through the character you think you should be. That's true freedom. It's not the freedom to do what you want, but the freedom from being obligated to be you. Because this you that you think you are is nothing more than a set of mental habits, selected memories, and stories you tell yourself before going to sleep. And where does all this illusion happen? In time. More specifically, in the fiction of past and future. Think about it. Have you ever experienced the past? No. You experience memories of the past, but those memories are happening now. Have you ever experienced the future? No. You experience anxiety or expectation about the future, but those emotions are happening now. The only thing you've ever experienced, are experiencing, and will ever experience, is this exact present moment. Everything else is thought. Everything else is abstraction. Everything else is story. The illusion sustains itself in this constant escape from the now. We live either rehashing the past or planning the future. we're rarely completely present with what's happening in this moment. And the trick is that the more you flee from now, the more you reinforce the sensation of being a separate self in time. Because this self needs time to exist. It needs a story, a before and after progress, a journey. Without time, without story, the self simply collapses. And what remains is just this: pure presence, simple consciousness, being without story. It's not complicated meditation. It's not a special state. It's just stopping the escape. It's just ceasing to add layers of thought onto direct experience. When you see a tree, do you really see the tree, or do you see the concept tree? When you talk with someone, do you really listen, or are you just waiting for your turn to speak? When you eat, do you really taste, or are you just consuming fuel while thinking about other things? The illusion dissolves the moment you really pay attention to what's happening without adding interpretation. Eckhart Tolle often calls this present moment the power of now, the only true reality. Everything else is just thought creating the illusion of separation in time. If you're enjoying this content, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. But there's one fear that keeps us trapped more than any other: the fear of death. It's the fundamental fear, the primordial anxiety that sustains the entire structure of the ego. Because if you really are this separate self, this bubble of individual consciousness, then death is the absolute end, total annihilation. And this fear permeates everything. It makes you seek security, accumulate possessions, build legacies, fight for immortality through children, works, or fame, all to avoid the inevitable disappearance of the character. But here's the liberating twist: you were never born. Think about it. Before you were born, was there something? Of course there was. There was the entire universe, and you weren't separated from it, you were it. You were the totality expressing itself. Then came this process called birth, and suddenly it seems like you're a fragment, a separate part. But this is just appearance. It's just the hide-and-seek game getting more elaborate, the wave appearing to separate from the ocean. But at no point does the wave stop being ocean. At no point do you stop being the totality. So when the body dies, what really happens? The character disappears, but the actor continues. The wave returns to the ocean, but never stopped being ocean. You believe you'll die because you believe you were born, because you believe you're this specific package of memories and characteristics. But if you observe carefully, you'll see that what you really are was never born and will never die. It's consciousness itself, timeless, formless, eternal. Bodies come and go like waves in the sea, but the sea continues. Forms appear and disappear like images on a screen, but the screen remains. I completely understand when you feel this is too abstract, too philosophical, too distant from real life with its bills to pay and concrete problems. But it's exactly in real life that this understanding becomes revolutionary. Think about your relationships, for example. How do you use other people to reinforce your illusion of separation? You feel attraction for someone and call it love, but often it's just the need to complete your sense of incompleteness. You feel rejection and call it hurt, but it's just the wounded ego, because someone didn't reinforce your self-image. You feel jealousy and call it caring, but it's just the fear of losing what you believe completes you. All relationship dramas come from this false premise of separation. Me here, you there. I need you. You hurt me. I love you, but with conditions. I accept you, but only if you're like this. When you see that all people are different expressions of the same singular being playing varied roles, all the drama disappears. It's not that you stop relating, but the relationship stops being based on need and fear. It becomes a spontaneous dance of forms that recognize their essential unity. It's the ocean playing wave with other waves, knowing all along that everything is ocean. And it's not just in relationships that we maintain the illusion. Look at our entire obsession with money and success. We believe that if we can accumulate enough, if we reach that position, if we conquer that status, then finally we'll be secure. Finally we'll be complete. Finally we can rest. But it's a shiny trap. A carrot dangling in front of the donkey that can never reach it. Because the ego is an insatiable fiction. It has no bottom. You can fill it with all the achievements in the world, and it will still whisper, "Not enough. I need more." I'm not saying money is bad or success is wrong. I'm saying that seeking these things as a way to complete the self is a lost game from the start. because the self you're trying to complete doesn't exist. It's like trying to fill a hole that isn't there. True wealth isn't having much, it's recognizing that you already are the whole. You're already the totality of existence expressing itself as this particular form in this particular moment. How can that be incomplete? How can that need something more? Incompleteness is just a belief, not a reality. But here's the most subtle trick of all: the spiritual search. Yes, even the search for awakening can become another layer of the illusion. The ego is very clever. When you start seeing through worldly games, it simply puts on spiritual clothes and continues the same game. Now you're not seeking money or status, you're seeking enlightenment. You're not collecting material objects, you're collecting spiritual experiences. You're not competing for power, you're competing for who's more awake, more conscious, more evolved. It's completely valid to feel this, but notice the paradox. Who's seeking awakening? The illusory self itself, and the more it seeks, the more it reinforces itself. It's like trying to use darkness to create light. The search itself is the problem. Not because seeking is wrong, but because it implies there's something to achieve, some future state different from this present moment. But awakening isn't a state. It's not an experience. It's not something you acquire. It's the recognition of what has always been true. It's seeing that you were never lost to need being found. So what to do? Paradoxically, do nothing. Or do whatever is happening without adding the story that it's going to take you somewhere special. The search can continue, but without the seeker taking themselves so seriously. It's like that Zen joke. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. The difference isn't in what you do, but in who you think is doing it. When the illusory doer is seen through, only the doing remains. When the illusory seeker is recognized, only the being remains. And you know what dissolves this entire structure of illusion faster than any technique? Silence. Not the forced silence of meditation where you fight against thoughts, but the silence that happens naturally when you stop adding mental commentary about everything. The chattering mind is constantly narrating experience. This is good, this is bad. This means that I like this, I don't like that. It's an incessant commentary that creates a layer between you and direct reality. When that commentary stops, even for a second, something extraordinary is revealed. Suddenly there's no more observer and observed. No more subject and object. No more you here looking at the world there. There's just this, whatever this is. An indivisible totality, a single experience without boundaries. You look at a tree and there's no more you in the tree, there's just seeing happening. You hear a sound and there's no more you and the sound, there's just hearing happening. The separation was just an idea, a thought creating an illusory boundary. And in that silence, in that space between thoughts, you get a taste of the real. It's not something mystical or extraordinary. It's the simplest and most obvious thing in the world. So obvious that we spend our entire lives ignoring it. It's like looking for the glasses that are on your face. You're searching for what you already are. You're trying to reach what you never left. You're seeking peace, completeness, truth. But all these things are your fundamental nature in this exact moment. They're just being obscured by the stories you tell about who you are and what's missing. Now comes the part that might seem disturbing, but is actually liberating. You're doing this to yourself. All the suffering, all the drama, all the sense of being trapped, you yourself are creating. There's no external power keeping you in the illusion. There's no malevolent cosmic force preventing you from awakening. You are simultaneously the prisoner and the jailer, the seeker and the hiding place, the problem and the solution. And this is good news. Because if you're doing this to yourself, you can stop at any moment. It's like those nightmares where you're being chased by a monster. The more you run, the closer it gets. The more you fight, the stronger it becomes. Until you finally realize, this is a dream. And in the moment of that realization, the monster loses all power. Not because you defeated it, but because you saw through the illusion. The same thing happens with life. When you see you're dreaming awake, that you yourself are creating all the drama, something fundamentally changes. You can keep dreaming, but now you know it's a dream. And that changes everything. I'm not saying this to blame you or to add another layer of guilt to the ego that already loves to blame itself. I'm saying this to show you your own power. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're not a powerless fragment in an indifferent universe. You are consciousness itself, playing at being this specific character. And you can laugh at the whole play at any moment. You can see the cosmic humor in all this seriousness. You can recognize the game and still keep playing, but now lightly, playfully, without totally identifying with the outcome. And here's something that's going to blow your mind. Awakening isn't a future event. It's not something that will happen when you finally manage to meditate right, or when you find the perfect guru, or when the universe decides you're ready. Awakening has already begun. It's happening now. In the exact moment you question the reality of the self, in the instant you ask yourself who's really reading these words, in the second you recognize there's something strange about this sensation of being a separate self, awakening is already operating. It's like sunrise. You don't notice the exact moment when night becomes day. There's a subtle gradient, an almost imperceptible transition. First, it's completely dark. Then there's a slight brightness on the horizon. Then shades of pink and orange. And suddenly it's day, but you can't point to the precise moment of change. Awakening is like that. It's not a sudden click where everything changes instantly. It's a gradual recognition of what has always been true. And that recognition is already happening in you right now. Otherwise, these words wouldn't have any resonance. You don't need to wait to be ready. You don't need to prepare more. You don't need to purify your karma, balance your chakras, or reach some special state of consciousness. All of this can be part of the game, part of the show, but they're not prerequisites. Because what you really are is already here, already awake, already complete. It's just the story about you that needs to be seen through. And that story loses power the exact moment you recognize it as story, not as absolute reality. So how to live after seeing through the illusion? You live as if you were already awake. Not as a technique or practice, but as a natural recognition. You don't take the character so seriously. You don't cling to stories so much. You dance with the illusion instead of fighting against it. Because seeing that the world is illusory doesn't mean you should reject it or transcend it. It just means you're no longer deceived by it. You know it's a game, so you can play fully without fear of losing. You know it's a dream, so you can dream lucidly without being dragged by the nightmare. This doesn't make you indifferent or disconnected. On the contrary, when you're no longer defending an imaginary self, you can respond to life much more authentically and spontaneously. You don't need to calculate your actions based on how they affect your self-image. You don't need to filter your feelings through what's appropriate for the character you think you should be. You simply live. You simply are. And there's a lightness in this, a freedom that doesn't depend on external circumstances. The bills still need to be paid. Practical problems still appear. The body still feels pain. Relationships still have their challenges. But there's a fundamental difference. You're no longer resisting life. You're no longer at war with what is. You're no longer trying to transform reality into something different from what it is in this moment. And in that deep acceptance, in that surrender to what is, paradoxically the true freedom emerges. Not the freedom to control life, but the freedom from needing to control it. You realize you were always afraid of the wrong things. You were afraid of losing control, but you never had control to begin with. You were afraid of dying, but you were never really born. You were afraid of not being enough, but you were never someone to be or not be enough. All the fears were based on a false premise. The idea that you're this separate self that needs to protect its existence. When that premise is seen through, the fears don't necessarily disappear, but they lose their authority. They become just passing sensations, without power to define who you are. And love? Love can finally be real. Because when you're no longer trying to use the other to complete your incompleteness, when you're no longer projecting your unmet needs onto the people around you, what remains is something much more beautiful. It's the recognition of yourself in the other. It's the ocean appreciating its own waves. It's consciousness celebrating its infinite forms. It's no longer I love you as separate objects, but love loving itself through these apparently distinct forms. This doesn't make love less personal or less intimate. On the contrary, now you can really see the person in front of you without the layers of expectation and projection. You can appreciate the unique dance they're dancing without needing them to dance according to your script. You can be present with what is, without constantly trying to transform the other person into what you think you need. And in that space of genuine acceptance, paradoxically, true intimacy becomes possible. Because intimacy isn't fusion, It's the ability to be completely yourself in the presence of the other, without mask, without defense, without fear. Life doesn't become perfect. Things don't stop changing. Chaos doesn't transform into eternal order. But there's an underlying peace that doesn't depend on any of this. It's the peace of knowing you're not the wave that needs to worry about the storm. You're the entire ocean. And the ocean was never disturbed by its own waves. Waves come, waves go, storms arise and pass. But the depth of the ocean remains untouched, serene, eternal. You are this. You've always been this. And nothing you can do or fail to do will change this fundamental truth. Awakening isn't achieving something new. It's dropping everything that isn't true. It's like taking off layers of heavy clothing you believed were part of you. First drops the identification with possessions. Then drops the identification with social roles. Then drops the identification with personal history. Then drops the identification with thoughts and emotions. And what remains? What was always here? Simple presence. Pure consciousness. Being without story. What you really are when you're not pretending to be someone. And you know what's most beautiful about all this? You can be wrong about all of this and still be free. Because freedom doesn't depend on having the right beliefs or perfect understanding. Freedom happens when you stop taking your beliefs so seriously. When you hold your truths lightly, ready to release them at any moment. When you realize that even these words you're reading now are just pointers. Fingers pointing at the moon, and not the moon itself. The moon is ineffable. It's what remains when all concepts cease. It's what you experience in that space between thoughts, in that silence that's not absence of sound, but presence of being. It's what's here right now, reading these words, but can't be captured by words. It's the observer that can never be observed because it's not an object, but the subject itself. It's the I am that exists before you add anything after the am. Just I am, without story, without definition, without limit. So take a deep breath. Look around, feel your body. Listen to the sounds. Notice that all of this is happening in you, not to you. You're not inside the world. The world is inside you. You're not having an experience. You are the experience itself. There's no distance between you and life. You are life recognizing itself through this particular form. And this was never a problem that needed to be solved. It was just a mystery to be lived, appreciated, celebrated. The illusion isn't your enemy. It's your playground. The false world doesn't need to be destroyed. It just needs to be seen for what it is. A masterful game of hide and seek where you're simultaneously what hides and what seeks. And now that you know this, now that the secret has been revealed, you can keep playing. But this time, with a smile. This time, without forgetting you're the player, not just the piece on the board. This time, dancing with life instead of fighting against it. This time, free. Because freedom was never about changing external circumstances. It was always about changing your relationship with them. It was always about seeing through the stories that turn what is into a problem. It was always about recognizing that behind all the changing forms, you are what never changes. You are the space where everything happens. You are the consciousness that illuminates all experience. You are the being that doesn't need a reason to be because it's prior to all reason. You simply are. And that's enough. That's always been enough. That will always be enough. So here's the final invitation. Live as if you already knew this. Not tomorrow, not when you're more prepared, not when life finally cooperates with your plans. Now, in this exact moment. Release the need to be someone special. Release the belief that you need to prove your worth. Release the story that something is missing. And simply be what you already are. Infinite consciousness temporarily playing at being finite. Eternity, experiencing time. Totality, exploring fragmentation. It's not your fate. It's your choice. And it's available now. It always was. It always will be. Awakening has already begun. You felt it. You recognized it. You know. Now it's just a matter of remembering more and more frequently, until forgetting becomes impossible. Until pretending to be just the wave loses all credibility. Until you laugh at all the seriousness with which you took the character. And then, with that cosmic laughter echoing in your chest, you finally allow yourself to relax into what has always been true. You are the entire ocean playing at being a drop.